The tension in the condo was palpable as I walked through the door, my arms laden with groceries. Eula's shrill voice carried from the living room, where she was engaged in a heated phone conversation. "I don't care what it takes," she hissed. "That girl needs to be put in her place." I froze, my heart pounding. There was no doubt who that girl was. As I rounded the corner, Eula's eyes locked onto mine. Her face morphed into a saccharine smile, but the malice in her gaze was unmistakable. "Oh, Stacy dear," she cooed, ending her call. "Let me help you with those bags. You look so tired." I squared my shoulders, meeting her gaze. "I'm fine, Eula. I can manage." Her eyes narrowed at my defiance. "Well, if you insist, though I do worry about your ability to handle everything. Caleb needs a stable environment after all." The implied threat hung in the air between us. I bit back a retort, reminding myself of the lawyer's advice. Document everything, but don't engage unnecessarily. Later that evening, as I was tucking Caleb into bed, Gareth appeared in the doorway. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low and strained. I nodded, pressing a kiss to Caleb's forehead before following Gareth to our bedroom. "What's going on with you lately?" he demanded as soon as the door closed. "Mom says you've been acting strange, disappearing for hours." I felt a flare of anger. "Oh, your mother says? And what do you think, Gareth? Have you bothered to ask me how I'm doing?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I'm asking now, Stacy, what's going on?" For a moment, I considered telling him everything. The job at the bookstore, the meetings with the lawyer, my plans to leave. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw only confusion and irritation. No understanding, no remorse for how he'd betrayed me. "Nothing's going on," I said finally. "I'm just trying to be a good mother to our son." Gareth's face softened slightly. "I know things have been tough with the move and all, but Mom and Dad are just trying to help. Can't you try to get along with them?" I laughed bitterly. "Get along? Gareth, your mother is actively trying to undermine me at every turn. And you just stand by and let it happen." His expression hardened. "That's not fair, Stacy. They're my parents. I can't just what?" I interrupted. "Stand up for your wife. Protect your son from their manipulation." Gareth's face flushed with anger. "You're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad love Caleb. They want what's best for him." "What's best for him?" I echoed incredulously. "Like when your mother tried to enroll him in that elite preschool without consulting me, or when she tells him that Mommy is confused whenever I disagree with her." Gareth's jaw clenched. "You're blowing things out of proportion. Mom is just trying to give Caleb opportunities." I shook my head, a wave of sadness washing over me. This man, who I'd once loved so deeply, was now a stranger to me. "You know what, Gareth? You're right. I am tired. Tired of fighting for a place in my own family. Tired of being treated like an outsider in my own home." His eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing his face. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm saying that something needs to change. Either you start standing up to your parents and supporting me, or—" I let the unfinished threat hang in the air between us. Gareth's face paled. "Or what?" he whispered. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Eula's voice floated through, sickly sweet. "Is everything all right in there?" I heard raised voices. Gareth shot me a pleading look before opening the door. "Everything's fine, Mom. Stacy and I were just talking." Eula's eyes darted between us, her lips curved in a triumphant smile. "Well, if you're sure, I was just about to make some tea. Would you like to join me, Gareth? We can discuss that business proposal your father mentioned." I watched as Gareth hesitated, torn between staying to finish our conversation and following his mother. In the end, habit won out. "Sure, Mom," he said, avoiding my gaze. "I'll be right down." As they left, I sank onto the bed, a mix of anger and determination coursing through me. This confrontation had made one thing crystal clear. I couldn't count on Gareth to change. If I wanted a better life for myself and Caleb, I would have to make it happen on my own. I pulled out my phone, sending a quick text to Lana. "It's time. Can you help me get everything ready?" Her response came almost immediately. "Absolutely. We're here for you, Stacy. Whatever you need." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. The storm was gathering, But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it head-on. Eula and Gareth had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn that I was no longer the meek, compliant woman they thought they could control. The time for silent rebellion was over. Now it was time for action. The Whitman family's annual garden party was in full swing, the manicured lawn dotted with elegantly dressed guests sipping champagne. I stood at the edge of the crowd, my heart pounding as I clutched the folder containing months of meticulously gathered evidence. Eula's voice carried across the garden, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. "Oh, Stacy dear, do come and join us. We were just discussing Caleb's future." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. As I approached the group, I caught sight of Gareth, his face tight with tension. He'd been on edge ever since our argument, clearly sensing the shift in our relationship, but unable or unwilling to address it. "What about Caleb's future?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Eula's smile was razor-sharp. "Well, we were just telling the Hendersons about that wonderful private school we're considering, the one with the accelerated program." I felt a flash of anger. We'd never discussed any private school. "Oh, when was this decision made?" Henry cleared his throat uncomfortably, but Eula pressed on. "Now, Stacy, don't be difficult. We're only thinking of what's best for Caleb." "What's best for Caleb?" I echoed, my voice rising. "Like when you try to enroll him in that elite preschool without consulting me? Or when you tell him that Mommy is confused whenever I disagree with you?" A hush fell over the gathering. Eula's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I don't know what you're talking about. Gareth, control your wife." But Gareth stood frozen, his eyes darting between me and his mother. I turned to address the stunned guests. "I'm sorry to disrupt your lovely party, but I can't stay silent any longer. For months, I've endured manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse at the hands of my in-laws, while my husband stood by and did nothing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eula's face contorted with fury. "How dare you, after everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean like using our entire savings to buy this condo without my knowledge or consent?" Gasps echoed around us. I opened the folder, pulling out bank statements and emails. "I have proof of every manipulation, every lie. How you've systematically tried to undermine my relationship with my son. How you've belittled and excluded me at every turn." Gareth finally found his voice. "Stacy, please. This isn't the time or place." "When is the time, Gareth?" I demanded, rounding on him. "When were you planning to stand up for me, for our family?" His face crumpled. I didn't know it was this bad. I thought if we just tried harder." "Tried harder?" Eula screeched. "We've bent over backwards to accommodate this ungrateful—" "That's enough, Eula." Henry's voice cut through the chaos. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. We may have overstepped." Eula whirled on him. "Don't you dare side with her. She's trying to turn our son against us." "No, Mom," Gareth said quietly. "Stacy's right. I've let this go too far." The realization that he was finally standing up to his mother should have been satisfying. But it was too little too late. I turned back to the gathered guests, many of whom looked deeply uncomfortable. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I couldn't let the facade continue. The Whitmans aren't the perfect family they pretend to be. They're manipulative, controlling, and willing to destroy their own son's marriage to maintain their illusion of power." Eula lunged forward, her carefully manicured nails clawing at the folder in my hands. "Give me those. You have no right." "I have every right," I said firmly, stepping back. "These are copies anyway. The originals are safe with my lawyer." The word lawyer seemed to echo across the lawn. Eula's face drained of color as she realized the implications. One by one, guests began to make their excuses and leave. The Hendersons, Eula's closest friends, couldn't meet her eyes as they hurried past. The carefully cultivated social standing she'd prized so highly was crumbling before her eyes. As the last guests departed, leaving only our fractured family on the lawn, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Stacy," Gareth pleaded, reaching for my hand, "we can fix this. We can go to counseling, make a fresh start." I gently pulled away. No, Gareth, it's too late for that. I've already filed for divorce. His face crumpled. But what about Caleb? I'm fighting for full custody, I said firmly. You're welcome to visit, but I won't subject our son to this toxic environment any longer. Eula, who had been uncharacteristically silent, suddenly found her voice. You can't do this. We'll fight you every step of the way. I met her gaze steadily. Go ahead, but remember I have evidence of every cruel word, every manipulation. Do you really want all of that aired in court? For the first time, I saw fear in Eula's eyes. The realization that her carefully constructed world was falling apart seemed to age her instantly. As I turned to leave, Gareth called out one last time. Stacy, please, I love you. I paused, looking back at the man I'd once built my life around. I loved you too, Gareth, but sometimes love isn't enough. With that, I walked away from the Whitman family, my head held high. The confrontation I dreaded for so long was over, and though the road ahead would be challenging, I felt lighter than I had in years. The storm had broken, and in its wake, I could finally see the promise of clear skies ahead. The pre-dawn light filtered through the curtains as I zipped up the last suitcase. My heart raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through my veins. Today was the day I'd reclaim my life and my son's future. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Stacy. Lana's whisper came through. It's time. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Come in, I whispered back. Caleb stirred in his bed as I approached. Mommy, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Hey, sweetie, I said softly, kneeling beside him. Remember our special adventure I told you about? It's time to go. His eyes widened with excitement, thankfully still too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. As I helped him dress, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for his resilience. Lana and Evan were waiting in the hallway, their faces a mix of determination and concern. Everything's ready, Evan whispered, taking one of the suitcases. The car's out back. We moved silently through the condo, each creak of the floorboard sending a jolt of panic through me. As we passed Gareth and Eula's rooms, I held my breath, half expecting Eula to burst out and catch us. But the doors remained closed, and soon we were stepping out into the cool morning air. Freedom was so close I could taste it. As Evan loaded the car, a voice behind us made my blood run cold. Going somewhere? I whirled around to find Gareth standing in the doorway, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. Daddy, Caleb exclaimed, oblivious to the tension. Gareth's eyes darted between us and the packed car. Stacy, what's going on? Where are you taking our son? I stepped forward, placing myself between Gareth and Caleb. We're leaving, Gareth. I told you at the party. I can't do this anymore. His face crumpled. But I thought we could work it out. I've been trying, Stacy. I told Mom to back off. It's too late. I cut him off, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. You had years to stand up to your parents, to be a partner to me. I can't wait any longer. You can't just take my son. Gareth's voice rose, panic edging into his tone. Mommy? Caleb's small voice came from behind me, tinged with fear. I turned, kneeling to meet his eyes. It's okay, sweetie. Daddy and I are just talking. Why don't you go with Aunt Lana to the car? Lana stepped forward, gently guiding Caleb away. As they walked to the car, I faced Gareth again. I'm not taking him away from you, Gareth. You can still be a part of his life. But I won't subject him to your mother's manipulation anymore. Gareth's eyes filled with tears. Please, Stacy, we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. For a moment I felt my resolve waver. This man, for all his faults, was still the father of my child, the man I'd once loved enough to marry. But then I remembered all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, all the times I'd felt small and insignificant in my own home. I'm sorry, Gareth, I said softly, but sometimes sorry isn't enough. A commotion from inside the house caught our attention. Eula's shrill voice carried through the open door. Gareth, what's going on out there? Panic flared in my chest. If Eula got involved, things could quickly spiral out of control. Go, Gareth said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Before she comes out. I stared at him, shocked. What? His eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of resignation and regret. "You're right. I should have stood up to them years ago. I don't want Caleb growing up like I did." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you," I breathed. "Gareth." Eula's voice was closer now. "Go," he repeated more urgently. "I'll handle Mom," I nodded, turning to run to the car. As I slid into the back seat next to Caleb, I saw Gareth step back into the house, closing the door behind him. "Drive," I told Evan, my voice shaky. As we pulled away from the condo, I watched in the rearview mirror as Eula burst out onto the front step, her face contorted with fury. But we were already turning the corner, leaving behind the prison that had been my home for too long. Caleb snuggled into my side, already drifting back to sleep. I wrapped my arm around him, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "You okay?" Lana asked softly from the front seat. I took a deep breath, looking out at the brightening sky. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." As we drove towards our new life, I felt a mix of emotions: fear of the unknown, sadness for what might have been, but most of all, an overwhelming sense of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time I was excited to see where it would lead. The sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold. It was a new day, in more ways than one, and I was ready to embrace it with all its challenges and possibilities. Caleb stirred beside me. "Mommy, where are we going?" I hugged him close, my heart full of love and determination. "We're going on an adventure, sweetie, just you and me." As we drove into the sunrise, I felt the last chains of my old life fall away. We were free, and the future was ours to shape. The autumn breeze rustled through the leaves as I watched Caleb chase a soccer ball across the park. His laughter, carefree and unburdened, was music to my ears. It had been 6 months since we'd left the suffocating confines of the Whitman household, and the change in both of us was palpable. "He's really thriving, isn't he?" Evan's voice came from beside me, warm and supportive as always. I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "It's like he's a different child. No more walking on eggshells, no more tension in the air." Evan's hand found mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. The gesture, once unthinkable in my old life, now felt natural and comforting. Our relationship had blossomed slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding. As we watched Caleb play, my mind drifted to the events of the past few months. The divorce proceedings had been surprisingly smooth, thanks in large part to the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. Gareth, perhaps finally realizing the extent of his parents' manipulation, had agreed to my terms without much fight. Eula, on the other hand, had not gone quietly. Her attempts to paint me as an unfit mother had backfired spectacularly when my lawyer presented the documented evidence of her behavior. The look on her face as her carefully constructed facade crumbled in the courtroom was something I'd never forget. "Penny for your thoughts?" Evan asked, pulling me from my reverie. I shook my head, smiling, just reflecting on how much has changed. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this life. "You should be proud of yourself, Stacy," he said softly. "What you've accomplished, the strength you've shown, it's incredible." His words warmed me, a far cry from the constant criticism I'd endured for so long. My job at the bookstore had blossomed into a management position, and for the first time in years, I felt valued and respected in my work. "Mommy, watch this!" Caleb's excited shout drew our attention. We watched as he executed a wobbly cartwheel, his face beaming with pride. "That's amazing, sweetie," I called back, my heart swelling with love. As Caleb returned to his game, I noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the park. Gareth, looking somewhat diminished without Eula's overbearing presence, walked towards us hesitantly. "Hi," he said, his voice uncertain. "I hope it's okay that I came." I wanted to see Caleb." I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. "Of course, he's been looking forward to your visit." Gareth's eyes flickered to Evan, a flash of something, regret, jealousy, crossing his face before he schooled his features. "You must be Evan. I've heard good things about you from Caleb." Evan stood, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Gareth. I'll give you folks some space. Stacy, I'll be by the coffee cart when you're ready." As Evan walked away, Gareth turned to me. "He seems like a good guy." "He is," I said simply. There was no need to twist the knife. We watched Caleb play in silence for a moment before Gareth spoke again. "I wanted to apologize, Stacy, for everything. I know it's too late, but I see now how blind I was, how I let my parents control everything." I studied his face, seeing the genuine remorse there. "Thank you, Gareth. That means a lot." He nodded, his eyes sad. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I let things get so bad. It's been eye-opening." "I'm glad," I said softly, "for your sake and for Caleb's." As if on cue, Caleb noticed his father and came running over. "Daddy, did you see my cartwheel?" Gareth's face lit up as he knelt to hug our son. "I sure did, champ. That was awesome." Watching them together, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't the family I'd imagined when I'd said, "I do," all those years ago. But it was a family nonetheless, one built on honesty, respect, and the hard-won wisdom of experience. As the afternoon wore on, Gareth said his goodbyes, promising Caleb another visit soon. I watched him walk away, feeling a chapter of my life truly close. Evan rejoined us, handing me a steaming cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" I nodded, leaning into his warmth. "Better than okay, actually. I feel free." We gathered our things, Caleb chattering excitedly about his playdate as we headed home. Our home. A modest apartment filled with laughter and love. So different from the cold, oppressive condo we'd left behind. That night, after tucking Caleb into bed, I found myself standing by the window, gazing out at the city lights that glittered like scattered dreams waiting to be claimed. The woman reflected in the glass was almost unrecognizable. Strong, radiant, and brimming with a sense of purpose. A far cry from the broken, uncertain version of myself I'd been just a year ago. I couldn't help but think of Eula, whose once dominating social circle had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but the shards of her manipulative reign. Of Henry, finally confronting the weight of his silence, forced to see the damage his inaction had caused. And of Gareth, fumbling to rebuild his life now that he was free of his parents' suffocating grasp, but also without me. But most of all, I thought of Caleb, my sweet, resilient boy, growing up in a home where love, respect, and honesty formed the foundation of every day. I pictured the lessons he'd carry with him, the courage to stand tall, the strength to bounce back, and the self-worth to know he deserved better. As I turned away from the window, my gaze landed on a framed photo on the shelf. Caleb and me, laughing together on a sunlit beach, our hair wild from the ocean breeze. A simple moment, yet it embodied everything I'd fought so hard to achieve: joy, freedom, and an unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. The journey had been grueling, filled with battles that tested every ounce of my strength. But standing here now, I knew every tear, every sleepless night, and every step forward had been worth it. Ahead of us lay a life filled with endless possibilities, untethered from the shadows of the past. And as I smiled at the photo, I realized I was ready to embrace it all, one beautiful moment at a time. If stories of resilience and hope inspire you, don't miss out on more powerful tales. Subscribe to SoraBook now and join us for the next chapter of unforgettable journeys.